Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, Anwar, Jason, Alex. We're all here. Red Talk Texas football following maybe the craziest week that I know this will sound like hyperbole, but maybe the craziest full week of stuff that's happened really since I've been covering the team. In fact, I want to start here, fellas. I'm going to give you the unofficial timeline of what's happened in the last week. And then every one of you can just start with whatever you want to in terms of at the back end of this timeline now today, what stands out from all of the things that happened. We go back to last Tuesday. That's when the MonkeyGate story hits. TMZ's picking up the Jeff Banks' girlfriend's monkey bit a kid on Halloween. Shortly after that, less than 24 hours later, because that story pops, someone posts a video of Jeff Banks having a good time after the Baylor game, although the details of exactly when that video and where he was is not completely clear, but like it's part of what happened. The very next day, after all of that happens, Steve Sarkisian has some issues with his team with regards to tardiness and showing up to practice on time and just the little details that often matter. He lectures the team about the importance of that. Following that, he gets into an argument with Joshua Moore that is among the bigger player coach blow-ups that have ever been reported on, I think, in my business of covering Texas football. Moore clears out his locker, or somebody clears out his locker, but then a couple of hours later, Moore meets with Steve Sarkisian, and they agree that he's going to come back to the team. The next day, Sarkisian does a press conference that was a little weird in that he kind of questioned the reporting chops of those that would dare mention Joshua Moore's situation. 2 days later, they lose by 3 touchdowns at Iowa State. 2 days after that, the situation with Joshua Moore comes to a head. He leaves the program after everything that had happened the previous week. And then the next day, after UT's players finish their player availability, a Texas player releases a video of Bo Davis essentially having a tirade on the team bus following the loss to Iowa State. That's a lot of stuff in a week. And it hits on just about every area that you could hit on in terms of it feels like a week's worth of stuff that helps explain how the season somehow gets to 4-5. Jason, I'll start with you. Of all of that stuff that's happened in the last week, on Thursday, now that it seems like we're on the other side of.
For now, yeah.
Until something happens today, right? Which it could, because I think everybody is got their pitchforks out to try to find the player that released the video, and people are close. I mean, the name has been mentioned on Orange Bloods, although we haven't confirmed it. Jason, for you, take a deep breath and tell me what's in your head about all of this.
That's a lot to unpack, isn't it, for 1 week? When you said the craziest week since you and I've been together a long time doing this, I was like, I don't know about that. But when you lay it all out step by step, I'm like, whoa, maybe he's right.
It's a lot.
It really is. It's never a dull moment, right? I don't know. I think I just take a bigger picture view of everything and I hate to start off the podcast by saying what a shit show it is, but it really has been a shit show in Austin. And I've wondered about this. I've expressed this on, I think this very modcast, is there a bigger, all those individual things are problems. The Joshua Moore thing, the video, is there a bigger problem, the foundation at Texas, the culture at Texas? Is it the culture of the high school athletes that they're pampered from the time they're 14 and 15 years old, and they're working out in $1 million facilities in the state of Texas? They come to the University of Texas, they get their asses kissed pretty much 365 days a year, and they have the best facilities and nice dorms and hundreds of thousands of fans cheering them on, which is, that's pretty common, I guess, that part of it is. But I just wonder if there's a culture problem at Texas when I take a step back and just look at the big picture? Is it just a lack of mental toughness in this program that even starts before they get to Texas, before they're at Texas? And then when they get to Texas, maybe it fosters that lack of mental toughness even more. And you can say, well, people have always said, oh, Texas is not a tough program. It's not a tough program. And Mac Brown dealt with that. Remember, Ketch? I mean,
oh yeah,
Alex and Anwar. Mac Brown dealt with it. Mac was able to overcome because he had superior talent to overcome that toughness issue. And he also had guys like Vince Young, who were quote unquote just junkyard dogs and had some of that tough mentality to them, but they also were able to out talent everybody. I don't know. It's just, if you're a Texas fan, it should be bothersome to you. And to me, it's just, is it a mental issue that just meant this? Is this program, for whatever reason, mentally weak? And how do you break that cycle? I mean, it's something I've thought for a long time. It's something I've wondered for a long time. And each time you stack a chip on top of the next with, wow, man, this person's kind of flaking out. And this person's, I mean, to videotape a coach and privately and put that out on social media or wherever it was released first, I mean, that is a cardinal sin in sports. You just don't do that. And that wasn't done as saying, hey, look at Bo Davis. I mean, look at how he's trying to fire up the troops. That was done to make Bo Davis look bad. I mean, and that's just, to me, that just is the Texas program in a nutshell. I don't know. They feel like they're getting picked on. These players feel like they're getting picked on, and it's just a lack of mental toughness. I don't know where it starts. I feel like it starts maybe before these players even get to Texas, and then it gets even worse. But like I said, it's a lot to unpack. My mind is all over the place as I'm kind of
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, but I just wonder if there is a bigger foundational problem than any of these isolated incidents, and I truly think there is with this Texas program for whatever reason.
Jason, I have a feeling we're going to unpack a lot of that, and it may be that your thoughts jive with Alex and Anwar's, but Anwar, same question, and apologies for essentially throwing a big old plate of stuff in front of you and like, hey, pick apart the stuff real quickly. But like, I was thinking about this podcast or this modcast earlier today, and it was just like, God, what a bunch of stuff every day. Some of it related, some of it not. It's just, where are you at mentally on, you've been knee deep in the middle of all of this because you were right at the beginning of reporting on the Joshua Moore situation. When you and I talked about that last week, when it happened, we knew this is not the normal player and a coach had a thing. And that stuff happens, but this was something bigger than that. But it's just one little feather in a dead bird full of feathers. How's that for you?
It's so interesting, Catch, because to be honest with you, my first reaction is I'm frustrated because we're talking about everything except Texas winning on the football field. Like that's all these conversations revolve, whether it's MonkeyGate, whether it's Jeff Banks hanging out at a Halloween party, whether it's the players showing up late, whether it's Joshua Moore, whether it's the leaked video. We talk about everything except the wins. Like that's where we're at. And that's the frustrating part for me, Catch, is that it's fine. It's a conversation. I'm not saying we don't need to have it, but there
are no wins. We can't talk about wins.
We can't talk about wins, but we can talk about how Bo Davis is trying to show guys how to lose. This is the demeanor you need to have with losing, which fine. I get it. Show me a sore loser and I'll show you, show me a good loser. I'll show you a loser. I understand that. And there's another part of me that's also like, damn, are we just talking about how guys should act after losses? There's a frustrating part that's like, man, I wish we were covering a program where we were talking about the wins and the W's as opposed to all this other circus stuff that seems to be happening. So that's my initial thing. There's a little frustration that goes in with that. Secondly, kind of the theme that you and I have been talking about, Catch, which there seems to be this disconnect between a certain segment of players and these new coaches. I mean, whether it's, the Joshua Moore was guys showing up late, even the video that's being leaked, to Jason's point, that was obviously geared to make Bo Davis look bad. That's when a coach starts getting on someone. That's not somebody saying like, man, I need to sit up and listen. That's one or a group of people, because it may not just be one. That's like, wait, let me get my phone. Watch this. And then them show this to somebody. That shows a level of like disconnect with these coaches and some of the players that are here, because that's the level of insubordination that, we thought Tom Herman's double bird was a bad thing. Well, this was kind of a double bird in many ways. So, we've heard a lot about Sarkisian over the last couple of weeks, trying to kind of assert his authority. He's talked about it in press conferences about the players coach thing, and essentially that doesn't mean he can't coach guys hard. And you basically, as they try to assert their authority, I don't know, we'll just get past Kansas and see what any of this even means over the next two games. I'll let Alex go.
Alex, batter up.
You guys have said a lot, man. I don't know how much more I can really add. I will say on the whole Bo Davis thing, I mean, when I first heard that, whenever I first saw that video, I looked at it and I was like, okay, this sounds about like a pissed off coach on a bus after a game, especially if the losing team is maybe not acting like a losing team. I was like, all right, what's the big deal about this? That sounds like a pissed off coach, talking to a losing football team. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, wait. A football player took out his phone and videotaped this. That's the issue. That's a kind of a, like Jason said, man, I don't know what it's indicative of. We can talk about Texas being soft and all this, and it goes back decades, people saying this. And is it the 7-on-7 culture? Is it the great facilities? Is it like Charlie Strong said, when he goes to Florida or recruit the Florida 5, these guys are picking up, dumbbells off some dirt floor in the gym that they work out in and all this stuff. And it's a different breed of cat and all the rest. But look, I mean, I don't see any issues with Garrett Wilson up in Ohio State. There are a million of these other guys. It's just, I mean,
Texas A&M's having a pretty good season.
Yeah, man. So I don't necessarily think it's the culture of Texas high school football that's leading to what's going on here at Texas. And I think it takes a very, very kind of Texas Longhorny type of person to sort of think that, to project the problems of this program onto Texas high school football writ large. I don't think that that's the case at all. But I do think just of all the rest of this stuff, man, I mean, the Joshua Moore thing, for one, if he doesn't want to be part of the program, that best of luck to him. Fans should thank him for his contributions and say, best of luck to you, because at this point in time, Texas doesn't need guys who aren't on board. This thing, there's a bunch of cleaning up that needs to be done here. But we do have to kind of at least recognize what the fallout of that is. I mean, Joshua Moore has played 74% of snaps so far this season. I mean, only Xavier Worthy has played more snaps. Even if Jordan Whittington would have stayed healthy, Joshua Moore would still be lapping that guy as far as snaps, because it was generally in 2 wide receiver sets when they go to 12 personnel. Texas utilizes number 8 and number 6, and that's just how they did it. We saw in the first 5 series of this last game, I guess, was Joshua Moore's sort of punishment for whatever did happen last week. And so Kelvontae Dixon started the game. Joshua Moore didn't get a snap until it's like the 6th series. But after that, after Joshua Moore was back in the game, after he served what I would guess is his punishment, we saw Kelvontae Dixon only on like 2 more snaps all game. And so even with this over his head, we could tell from what the coaching staff, and at that point, I'll bet you the coaching staff didn't know that Joshua Moore was going to enter the transfer portal. They probably thought punishment, let him play, we're back to normal. And so we saw, whenever all things being equal, Joshua Moore's had his punishment. Now he's back in the game. We're not getting Kelvontae Dixon in over Joshua Moore. Joshua Moore's the better option. So now Texas is moving forward with an option that the coaches, by their actions, not their words, but by their actions, we've seen feel right now is in inferior option to what Joshua Moore was. And so that's something to monitor. All of a sudden, this Texas wide receiver group without Joshua Moore becomes very Xavier worthy and very Marcus Washington heavy. And Marcus Washington, God love him, he's not as talented as a Joshua Moore, as a Jordan Whittington, all the rest of them. We're gonna have to see what Kelvonte Dixon has. It's a dynamic that, Joshua Moore's your number 2 wide receiver. It doesn't feel like that bad of a loss given all the associated stuff swirling around, but there will be some football ramifications to it.
It's funny, Alex, I'm looking at your Tope Amati Gaslight column right now. And one of the very first things that you said in the column is kind of where my head is on the Modcast, which is, I don't know how much we need to review Iowa State in depth, because who wants to read that? And consequently, I don't know who wants to sit here and listen to us preview Kansas, because yeah, exactly. I love your headline, by the way, Jason. Stop what you're doing. You only get to do that once. I'm glad you saved it all season long for KU. But this kind of big picture, 30,000 feet conversation that we're starting off this Modcast with about kind of where the program is, I feel like that's the conversation that people want us to have this week, that we're just wasting our time if we're talking about, Texas passing game since Jordan Whittington's injury, and now they've got new, I don't know that people want that. So I think let's start with, there's a short-term and a long-term, I think, conversation to how do you handle what's happening and what's happened so far, let's just say in the last month. Short-term, Jason, is there anything in my head, I'm like, look, doesn't matter that it's mathematically improbable. Win the last 3, you're 7-5, you win a bowl game, you're 8-5. And then you can sell that we ended the season on a win streak, and that, that there's optimism. We've seen it last year. All it took was Texas to get on a baby win streak. And it was like, Texas is going to play in the Big 12 championship. Tom Herman can keep his job. And then they lose to Iowa State, and it just all comes crashing down. In your mind, what can be salvaged short term? And I think that's both on the field with an eye on recruiting.
Not much. I think you nailed it. I mean, you win out, you win 3 games, you go to a bowl game, you win that. You're 8-5. You can sell that, and there's some positive momentum. Maybe whoever the quarterback is, maybe Casey Thompson settles in and plays well. You can point towards that for the future. You probably need, but still you have to change the culture of this program. If that means whoever released that video needs to be kicked to the curb, I mean, maybe that needs to happen. I think that probably does need to happen. To me, you're putting just a Band-Aid on a wound that's not going to heal. If you're just saying, okay, yeah, they win 3 games in a row to end the season. Okay, things are great. Well, not really. There's still bigger issues, underlying issues that need to be corrected for this program to truly take the next steps. I don't know. I mean, they have a big recruiting weekend this weekend. Maybe you try to reel in a big commitment to get some recruiting momentum. It all boils down to wins and losses in the end. I mean, we always say that. Listen, if Texas was 7-2, which isn't out of the question. I mean, a few bounces here, a few plays there, they could be 7-2. Nobody well, first off, Bo Davis isn't making that speech. Secondly, we're not talking about the same things we're talking about. Nobody's releasing videos. Joshua Moore probably is not transferring.
About the monkey, do you think that still goes down?
Well, that probably still goes down, Alex. There was no avoiding
What if
that.
it had been a dog?
Well, it wouldn't be. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it wouldn't be the story it was. And frankly, if it was AJ Milwauee's girlfriend that had a monkey, it wouldn't be as big of a story. I mean, part of the story is that it's pole assassin's monkey. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot that's happened this year that there's some fine margins that have made
it's a headline writer's dream. Ultimately, that's what that story was all about. I had friends in Singapore that don't follow American sports that saw monkey, pole assassin, kid bitten on Halloween thousands of miles away.
Yeah, you're right. That's a perfect analogy. A head writer's dream. It really is.
It's an SEO dream too, right? You hit everything for your SEO, like every single thing that you want Google to recognize and reward you for is in that headline.
Yeah, sad but true. But I don't know. To answer your original question, what the short term, what can be salvaged, Catch? It just comes down to winning games, man. That's all you can do at this point is try to finish the season with 3 consecutive wins, go to a bowl game and win that game. 8-5, it's not what anybody envisioned, but it's not awful. You can sell 8-5 to recruits. You can sell, hey, we finished on a high note. You can sell potentially, hey, our offense is playing better. We're weeding out some of these bad apples, so to speak. Joshua Moore was a problem. He's gone. Maybe whoever released this video was a problem. He's gone. We're changing the culture. We're getting our guys. You recruits are our guys. Come in and help us change the culture and get this thing turned around. It's a tough sell. It's not ideal, but that's about the only sell I can think of in the short term that Sarkisian and his staff can utilize. That and early playing time. I guess when you're talking recruiting, and they've been selling that, and they're going to have recruits on campus this weekend. Hey, guys, come in early. Come on. You can not only help us turn this around, you can help us turn around starting next year. You can start for us next year. You're an offensive lineman. You can start for us next year. You're Denver Harris. You can start for us next year at cornerback. You're Evan Stewart. You can start for us next year. We just lost arguably our second best receiver. It's wide open, man. Come in and play alongside Xavier Worthy. So there are selling points they can utilize, but it's not where Texas wanted to be, certainly.
The hard part about selling playing time, Jason, is the tricky part of that is telling them that they don't think they're good enough to potentially play somewhere else.
Mac Brown used to always say that because coaches would use that against him and say, hey, if you go to Texas, you're going to sit for 2 or 3 years. Come here, you can play early. And Mac would turn that around and say, hey, what is that coach telling you about your talent? We believe in you. Come here. Yeah, we got great players, but we believe in you. So you're right, Anwar. That's a good point. There's always a counter argument to everything. Texas can use that as a selling point. Hey, offensive lineman, come here. You can play early for us. And then Texas A&M can say, well, what are they saying about your talent, your talent level, that you're not good enough to compete at a place like Texas A&M or the Ohio States or Alabamas of the world? It's a really good point. There's always a counter argument to it, but
do you know how a coach should counter that? How a recruiter should counter that? He should say, no, it's not about you not being good enough to go there and start. It's about you not being. It's just about us having the openings. Having the openings. It's like it's easy. It's right there. It is. You won't even have to really compete.
Or you just tell them, hey, you know what? You're good enough to start for our program too, and you know what? We're a championship program, and you can play for us. You want to go to a 6-6 program? Yeah, maybe you play, but you know what? We think you're good enough to come to our program, compete early, and compete for championships. So,
well, Jason, you make a really good point, because one of the things that, and Anwar, I want to get your thoughts on this, because this is the elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned. I feel like we spent 6 months leading up to the start of this season talking about the stakes of this season, that Sarkisian going into year one is dealing with Alabama and Ohio State, and Clemson comes in and takes Cade Klubnik, our guy. And, there are the national programs have been rating this state really for the last half decade, like significantly among the top talent. But Sarkisian enters year one with Texas A&M coming off of a season which it finishes in the top 5, has really big expectations. And you didn't want to let Texas A&M separate from you because that's a recruiting problem. You also have the Oklahoma thing where they've won the conference a billion times in a row. So they needed to fight fires on local levels and the national levels. And all that's really happened for the short term and long term until they can change this is it feels like they've fallen off of a tier that would warrant them even being in the conversation with those other programs. I mean, quite frankly, if you're a player choosing between just Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M right now, just those 3 schools, Texas isn't holding up real well to the schools that it needs to be beating. And it feels like that's a point that's really going to get hammered home in Sark's second season, when they'll be able to point to the first season's record and go, really? Really? You're going to pass up a chance to play for immediate championships here over a busted dream that's been busted for a decade? Like, this is the worst thing that could have happened this season.
You know what, Ketch? What it reminds me of, Ketch, and I think what's probably needs to occur for Texas to have any, sense of recruiting success, more so for 2023 as opposed to 2022. Sarkisian is going to actually have to probably take a page out of Tom Herman's book and recruit out of state, and potentially have a half of his class made up from out-of-state players. When you remember when they were going after the Brew McCoys or the Jake Smiths of the world, Bijan Robinsons, and going out because understanding your in-state dynamics are potentially working against you, but guys who are from different places, whether it's the Floridas, the Arizonas, the Californias of the world, may feel like, okay, I wouldn't mind going to like a big university like Texas and sell them on all those things. Like, to me, that becomes a thing that, I know, everyone always talks about winning the state, but I think even when Herman and those guys realize it's going to be tough sledding here, that's where they just said, man, just get on a plane and keep going and just keep going and keep going. I think that's the one thing that could work, that we've seen work, Ketch, in order to obtain a top class, or at least
California. Anwar is ripe for the picking right now. I mean, USC's down, so Sark's got ties in California, so could work. It could work.
I mean, that is what Tom Herman did in his second full recruiting season. They cleaned up that Houston area in 2018, signed a top 5 class, at least in the Rivals rankings. The next season, they signed a top 15 class, but half those kids were from out of state because Texas got abused in state. It was just a year where the Ohio States and Alabamas of the world came in and took Texas's cornbread in recruiting, and A&M's for that matter. And what's interesting about Jimbo Fisher, their resurgence really started with him recruiting out of state really well before he started recruiting in state really well. It was as if when Jimbo showed up, Alex, nobody in Texas was buying A&M and Jimbo, at least among the top level recruits, really and truly. But you'd be like, God, he went and got like a 5-star out of DC or New York or whatever. And you're like, that's a weird one. How's Jimbo getting kids from New York State down to College Station? But slowly but surely, the in-state recruiting has picked up. Their out-of-state recruiting has always been good under Jimbo. And now, Alex, I think they're going to finish with the best class in the history of Texas A&M football. I really do. I think when this thing's all said and done, they are a low-key candidate to finish with the number 1 recruiting class in the country. And it's not unthinkable that they could sign 7 or 8 5-stars in this class. It's a big problem for Texas.
What about the class when they signed Green just recently? Wasn't that a super good one?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't have
nothing like what their potential. I don't know what their ranking was.
I mean, so I don't follow it as closely as like you and Jason as far as
what they're doing this year is for them is unprecedented. And Ketch is right. I mean, they've got some big fish on the hook. If they can reel them in, I mean, it might be the best class in the country.
Well, that's certainly horrible news for Texas fans. And I think Ketch, there was a weird sort of dichotomy whenever Jimbo Fisher first came to A&M, because it felt like, and even Dustin, that was a Florida State fan, that we would get insight from him on the Modcast a long time. He wasn't even sure how this thing was going to go, especially, that they guaranteed, what was his contract? Was it 10 years, $100 million, something like that? And people were just said, whoa, man, if A&M screwed, a lot of people thought it was, everybody knew it was ballsy. A lot of people thought it was straight up ridiculous. They thought that this was a bad move and everything like that. So it's turned out to be a good move for A&M. I think that it goes to what Anwar was saying, what Jason said Jimbo's path was there. Anwar said that how he would do it was he would look out of state. And Jason said, well, they didn't really come into this in-state dominance until they had sort of shown some of the fruits of their recruiting labor out of state, gotten some wins on the board and stuff like that. Maybe that should I hadn't really thought much about that as a strategy for Texas, but maybe Anwar could be on to something.
Hey, but Alex and I mean everybody, I go back to just how quickly this momentum can change. Go back to October 9th, noon October 9th. Texas is playing Oklahoma, or Texas playing Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl.
Man.
Texas is up in that game by 3 scores, and we're all sitting here thinking, okay, this thing's about to take off for Texas. A&M is playing Alabama.
Alabama.
They've got that night, they've got a backup quarterback that's going to be playing. It's amazing to me to think back 4 games, I guess it's been 5 weeks, how things have changed. And quite frankly, Jimbo Fisher and his staff have coached circles around Steve Sarkisian and his staff. I mean, with a backup quarterback, A&M beats Alabama. They're on a 4-game winning streak now. They've beaten Auburn at home in front of a bunch of big-time recruits. Texas, on the flip side, has blown 4 consecutive leads in the second half. It's just mind-boggling to me how this thing has changed in the span of 5 weeks. And now we're talking about A&M having the #1 class and laying the foundation for a championship caliber program. They've recruited well last year, and this year it's going to be a whole other level. Texas, now we're like, hey, is Sark ever going to be able to survive at Texas? I mean, that's the legitimate question that people are asking now. I've never in my life seen something change so dramatically, so quickly from where it was a little more than a month ago. It's just, I still can't quite wrap my head around how much the pendulum has swung towards A&M and away from Texas.
We're not even talking about Oklahoma yet, which they
Yeah.
win another Big 12 championship, and really isn't the recruiting vehicle that Texas needs to worry about the most. It's turned into A&M, but you still have Alabama and the Ohio States of the world that what Texas is going to have to decide really quickly. And Anwar, I think this goes to your point about going out of state. Texas has to decide, and I think they learned whatever happens this season, they're going to come out of this and go, okay, well, boy, we hung on all of those big time 5-star guys until the very end, and we got this many. If this is our lot in life to finish as a bridesmaid for 5 stars, like where should our focus at that point be? Like what tier of prospects? I wonder if Texas, it's not the thing that I actively teach, right? Because I constantly stress the importance of signing elite talent. But the downside of going for elite talent is if you don't get it, then there's Jason, we see it in Texas all the time, right? Where Texas is focused on other guys and the players below them start their recruitments and Texas isn't a part of it, really. And then if Texas misses on a few players, it's not as easy as it used to be where you just go to your next guy and you're number 3, your number 4, your number 5 guy on the list, and they're just dying to jump on a Texas scholarship. In the world that they're in now, and we're talking about this with the offensive line, they want to sign 5. They've got 2 commitments. Jason and I, as much as we recover this, Alex, we cannot tell you today for sure where those offensive linemen are coming from in this class. And if they miss out on their primary targets, it's hard to know exactly what quality of linemen they're then bringing in. And Sark outlined it. We don't want to bring in scrubs. We want to bring in guys that can be program changers. But if you miss on those, it's not as easy as, okay, well, we missed on the number 1 tackle. Let's go get the number 3 tackle in Texas. They won't be able to do that. And I'm curious how that affects their planning. They need to really be thinking about this.
Well, they should have been thinking about this too. They should have been thinking about this in the transfer portal. When they were trying to go after all these linebackers and all this stuff. I was just like, what do you guys do? Linebackers? What are we talking about? Like, look at the offensive line. I think whenever they first got here and they took their audit of what they had, they walked in the room, they saw Tope Amadi, they saw Denzel Okafor, they saw these dudes that looked like they're, straight out of casting for the Green Mile movie, like Charlie Strong used to call Ridgeway. But like both those guys are the same kind of way, they look at them, they're like, all right, we got some players here. We saw these younger guys like Carrick in the bowl game. We saw the center, Jake Majors, in the bowl game. You know, we got some players here. Some of these guys look like they're big and strong and good. And I don't think that they took account of what they had on their hands the way that I would have advised them to, you know. And like now they've said, Catch, like, here's the thing. They can't, it's like, it's off the table not to bring in 5 this year. Sark is on record saying he's bringing in 5, at least 5. And not only that, he had the temerity to go ahead and say, if he wanted 5, he could get them tonight. So if that's the case, if you come out of this class and you don't have 5 goddamn offensive linemen, we're going to have big fucking issues, because you said back in the end of October that you could have 5 of these guys tonight. So, and you need at least 5. And you set the goalpost right there. So the question shouldn't be about whether they get 5. They're going to get 5. Otherwise, Sarkisian's a liar. But the question is, like you said, who are the 5? I mean, we've talked about it over. Is it Ernest Green, Malik Agbo, Neto Omiazulu? I mean, who are the remaining 3? Who are the other options? That's still up in the air. And I mean, it's definitely more Jason's corner about sort of what the percentages are on each of those guys and who they could possibly be, the various permutations of those groups, whether Devon Campbell is still even on the menu, whether or not Cam Dewberry feels like he's just drifted way too far toward Aggie lands. I mean, those are things that I would defer to Jason regarding.
Well, not to get too far off track, but those guys you mentioned are all going to be on campus this weekend. As I look, Cam Dewberry, official visit; Devon Campbell, official visit; Kelvin Banks, unofficial visit; Nato Umeozulu, I believe, is an official visit, but he will be there regardless. They've got some really good 2023 offensive linemen that'll be on campus this weekend. It's a very conscious effort to bring those guys in all together. This is going to be a big recruiting weekend for Texas. Devin Brown's a Rivals 100 quarterback, but by and large, this is a big offensive line recruiting weekend, and it's pretty clear what they're doing. They're bringing all these guys in together, saying, listen, look at our depth chart. Nobody needs you the way we need you. Let's get a group of you together. Come in as a group. You guys can be the foundation. You guys can be the centerpiece of what gets us turned around. They can still win Devon Campbell, that race by themselves. They're not winning Cam Dewberry. They're not winning Kelvin Banks, I don't think, without selling those guys as basically, let's come in as a package type deal. Let's get all you guys in. You guys can be the headline of this class. And the headline of when this thing gets turned around in a year or two, it'll be because of you 4 or 5 offensive linemen that are coming in together. So it's a pretty interesting strategy. I said on our board last night, I think the thread title was, hey, Texas is going to swing for the fences. And it feels like to me, they're either going to hit a home run or strike out with this philosophy. And it's a huge recruiting weekend. Like you said, Alex, if they don't hit a home run this weekend and they strike out on those guys, what 5 do they bring in? They've got 2 committed. What other 3 do they go get? I honestly don't know who it would be at this point. And they're going to, as Ketch said, it's not going to be options 2 and 3. It's going to be way further down the pecking order for this offensive line class. But huge recruiting weekend for Texas.
Okay, so 2 things. First off, if we're having the discussion about the big picture implications of this season, the wins, the losses, and the recruiting, I do think if we came out of this deal where we were able to report Devon Campbell, I mean, in the most wild scenario, Kelvin Banks, and then one of the other guys to go with the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of come out of this thing thinking like, what the hell, man? What a rabbit they pulled out of a hat here. Like that's something you can point to and say,
streaking the quad
right here. This is a major win.
Yeah, that's.
But secondly, what are any of those guys? And I know you don't. These are 16, 17-year-old kids, and I mean, you can't make your living predicting what they're going to do all the time. But like, are some of these guys committing soon? What's the timeline for it? Like,
there'll be some December commitments. I mean, signing day is 1 month and 4 days early. The first day of early signing period is 1 month.
He's literally counting, Alex.
Yes, he's counting, but it's 1 month, 3 days and 21 hours, Catch. But yes, a few of them will commit in December. I would expect a lot of them will. Cam Dewberry probably will. Malik Agbo. You've got like a guy like Devon Campbell is saying, hey, I'm going to commit at the Under Armour All-American game, which is January 2nd. But a lot of times what we'll see is those guys will actually go ahead and commit and sign in December.
Yep.
Keep it quiet, and then they'll announce basically a week later in January. So I would expect by mid-December, that early signing window, I think just about all of them will have their minds made up. They're not going to be taking any more visits after that. It's, unless somebody waits and takes a January unofficial visit because they've all used their official visits. But to answer your question, Alex, yeah, I would expect just about all of them to have their minds made up by December. Now, will they all announce in that early window? Maybe not. Some may wait till January.
So if this were going to be a group package deal, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to keep this on offensive line recruiting, but I think that it's important to the overall discussion. Is there any scenario that you see in which there's any, like, if they do have a big weekend, what are the chances that one of these guys could like commit in the coming weeks, coming off the visit, having a great time? Maybe
Not
one of these guys
likely.
peels off into Texas.
If there's one that I would think would be a possibility to commit in the next week or two, would be Nato Umeozulu, the offensive lineman at Allen. And I say that only because he's such a wild card. He doesn't talk. Nope. I mean, I've talked to college coaches who've spent a lot of time with him, and they say, we have no clue what this guy's going to do. So NATO is a bit of a wild card. I think the others probably wait. They want to have their big splash announcements probably on the first day of that national signing window. A lot of them will be done on television, nationally, locally, so on and so forth. So I wouldn't expect anybody in the next couple of weeks, maybe NATO being the wild card.